June 3rd, 2023. Taiwan Strait, international waters. A Chinese destroyer suddenly cuts across the bow of an American warship. Distance, 150 yards. At naval speeds, that's seconds from collision. The American captain is forced to execute emergency maneuvers. Alarms blare. Crews brace for impact. A collision doesn't happen, but something else does. In that single reckless moment, the Chinese destroyer reveals something Beijing never wanted the world to see: the real strategy behind their routine patrols. This is how one naval mistake exposed an entire pattern of aggression. To understand what happened in the Taiwan Strait, you need to understand the invisible war being fought in the Indo-Pacific. For decades, the United States Navy has conducted freedom of navigation operations, FONOPS, transiting through international waters that China claims as its own: the Taiwan Strait, the South China Sea, waters that, under international law, are open to all nations. But China sees it differently. Beijing claims nearly the entire South China Sea through its nine-dash line, a boundary rejected by international courts but enforced by hundreds of Chinese vessels. The strategy is simple: make these waters so dangerous, so unpredictable, that other nations simply stop coming. It's called gray zone warfare. Not quite combat, not quite peace, just constant pressure. Chinese vessels shadow foreign warships, Coast Guard cutters swarm fishing boats, militia vessels accidentally collide with supply ships. And when that doesn't work, the People's Liberation Army Navy steps in. By 2023, these encounters had become routine, dozens per year. Most stayed professional. Both sides maintained safe distances, communicated over radio, and went their separate ways. But on June 3rd, 2023, something changed. USS Chung-Hoon, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, and HMCS Montreal, a Canadian frigate, are conducting a joint transit through the Taiwan Strait. This is legal, routine. The strait is 110 miles wide. International law allows free passage through any waters beyond 12 nautical miles from shore. The two warships are steaming at 18 knots, maintaining standard formation. Their radars track multiple contacts, Chinese vessels monitoring their progress. This is expected. What happens next isn't. A Chinese Type 052D destroyer, hull number 132, the Luzhou, suddenly accelerates. It's been shadowing at a distance, but now it's closing fast. The American bridge crew watches their screens. The Chinese destroyer is on an intercept course. Not parallel, not shadowing, intercepting. Standard protocol calls for Chinese vessels to maintain at least 1,000 yards separation. The Luzhou is now at 500 yards, then 300. The USS Chung-Hoon's captain issues warnings over bridge-to-bridge radio. No response. Or rather, the response is the Luzhou continuing to close. And then it happens. The Chinese destroyer cuts directly across the Chung-Hoon's bow. Distance, 150 yards. At 18 knots, that's less than 30 seconds to collision. The American captain has milliseconds to decide: maintain course and risk collision, or execute emergency maneuvers and yield the right-of-way. He chooses survival over protocol. The Chung-Hoon reduces speed, turns hard to port. The deck lists as the destroyer executes what's called an emergency backing bell, reversing propulsion while still moving forward. Crew members grab railings. Loose equipment slides across compartments. The ship shudders under the sudden change in momentum. The Chinese destroyer passes, so close that sailors on both ships can see each other across the water. And then, it's over. The Luzhou continues on, resuming its patrol as if nothing happened. But the U.S. Navy doesn't let it end there. Within hours, footage of the incident is declassified and released to the public. The video is damning, clear evidence of unsafe seamanship and a blatant violation of maritime collision regulations. The Chinese Ministry of Defense responds immediately. Their statement claims the American vessel deliberately intruded into Chinese waters and that the PLAN destroyer acted professionally and safely. But here's the problem with that narrative: the data doesn't support it. GPS logs from both vessels show the transit occurred entirely in international waters, over 20 nautical miles from the nearest Chinese territorial claim. The Automatic Identification System, AIS transponder data, shows the Luzhou accelerated and changed course to intercept, not the Chung-Hoon. Even more revealing, this wasn't an isolated incident. U.S. Indo-Pacific Command releases a report showing 180 similar intercepts by Chinese vessels in just 18 months. Most weren't publicized. Most didn't come within 150 yards, but the pattern was undeniable. The Chinese strategy became clear. Use dangerous maneuvers to create incidents. Then blame the other side. If the U.S. warship maintains course, China can claim provocation. If the U.S. warship yields, China has successfully asserted control over international waters. It's a lose-lose scenario, and that's the point. But the Luzhou's captain made a critical mistake. He pushed too far, too fast, too obviously, and in doing so, he gave the world concrete evidence of what had been suspected for years. China wasn't conducting defensive patrols. They were conducting aggressive intimidation campaigns. The June 3rd incident became a flashpoint in U.S. China relations. The Pentagon condemned it as unsafe and unprofessional. NATO allies issued statements of concern. Japan, Australia, and the Philippines, all facing similar Chinese pressure in their own waters, publicized their own incidents. China doubled down. State media ran stories portraying the plan as defenders against American hegemony. The Ministry of Defense released their own edited footage, claiming the U.S. provoked the encounter. But the international community wasn't buying it, because the Luzhou incident did something no amount of diplomatic statements could do. It provided irrefutable visual evidence of Chinese aggression. Naval analysts from around the world examined the footage. Their conclusions were unanimous. The Chinese destroyer violated basic rules of seamanship, international maritime law, and military conduct. More importantly, the incident revealed the strategic goal behind these encounters. China isn't trying to sink U.S. warships. They're trying to normalize aggression, to make dangerous maneuvers so common that they become accepted, to slowly redefine what international waters means through repeated violations. It's territorial expansion without firing a shot, and it's working. In some areas, Filipino fishing vessels now avoid waters their government says are theirs. Vietnamese Coast Guard ships retreat when Chinese militia swarms them. Malaysian oil rigs shut down under pressure. But the U.S. Navy hasn't stopped conducting phone ops. If anything, they've increased. In 2023 alone, over 30 freedom of navigation operations were conducted in the South China Sea and Taiwan Strait. Each one a message. International law still matters. The Luzhou's mistake wasn't just bad seamanship. It was revealing the strategy too clearly, too publicly, at a time when the world was watching. Today, the USS Chung-Hoon continues to patrol the Indo-Pacific. So does the Chinese destroyer Luzhou. The incident on June 3, 2023 didn't start a war. It didn't even result in diplomatic consequences beyond stern statements and edited press releases. But it did something more important. It exposed a pattern, a strategy, a deliberate campaign to rewrite international norms through intimidation and close calls. Every time a Chinese vessel cuts off a foreign warship, they're testing boundaries. Every time they claim international waters as their own, they're gambling that no one will push back. The Luzhou's captain made a mistake. He pushed too hard, got too close, and gave the world undeniable proof of what many had suspected. But here's the uncomfortable truth. That mistake was probably calculated, because even if the world sees the aggression, even if the evidence is overwhelming, what are they going to do about it? China has bet that the answer is nothing. And so far, they've mostly been right. The destroyer that cut across the Chung-Hoon's bow didn't just expose Beijing's aggression, it exposed our willingness to accept it.